Hello, everyone. I am Cody.
And I am Brent.
And we are the Hugonauts, here to review and discuss for you the best sci-fi novels of all time. This week we have a special episode, an interview with author and scientist David Brin.
Oh, yes.
Very stoked about this one. And for the next episode, we're also doing something special. So make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, or download, follow if you listen to the podcast, because we are going to do a little bit of analysis on the short story by E.M. Forster, The Machine Stops, published in 1909. And since it was published in 1909, along with the analysis, we're also going to do a full cast recording of an audiobook.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. It's not too long a short story, so even the recorded version should be like an hour and a half, but it's super good, incredibly prescient, even though it's like 110 years old at this point. It's really incredible. And we're going to be joined by actor and writer Kiran Subramanian. So we'll be doing the three big parts in it between the three of us. It should be really, really fun. And because that's a little bit different, please do find us on social media at Hugonauts Pod on Twitter, at Hugonauts Podcast on Instagram. Shoot us an email at hugonautspodcast@gmail.com. We're really curious to hear what you think of it, since this is a little bit different. We've heard really good things about the author interview with Joe Haldeman. So now we're talking with David Brin. We're going to keep trying to do more of those, but let us know what you think of the short story audiobook as well when that comes out. Should be a really, really fun, interesting episode.
Yeah, surely there's more, out of copyright stuff that we can dig into, the old sci-fi. No
doubt, all kinds of good old stuff to go through.
Get some of that out there. Okay, so refocusing. Right now, we have our interview with David Brin. David Brin is an astrophysicist whose international best-selling novels include The Postman, Earth, Existence, and the Hugo Award winners Startide Rising and The Uplift War. He consults for NASA, companies, agencies, and nonprofits about the onrushing future. Brin's first nonfiction book, The Transparent Society, won the Freedom of Speech Award. And he's just an all-around fascinating guy, scientist, author, everything about him.
Yeah, very excited about this conversation. We'll say the Startide Rising, not only did it win the Hugo, it also won the Nebula, which is very rare for one book to win both awards. That's the book of his that we both sort of love the most. And so want everybody to have a little bit of context in case you haven't read any of his books for the conversation. So here's the scoop with Startide Rising. Startide Rising is in his the second book of his Uplift series, but you don't need to read the first one necessarily if you don't want to, although Sundiver is also good. But in any case, it follows a human spaceship. Well, actually not a human spaceship, a spaceship from Earth, but is primarily crewed and captained by dolphins. The whole sort of conceit of the Uplift universe is humanity has uplifted and helped sort of speed up the evolution of chimpanzees and dolphins. This one follows dolphins. The third one, Uplift War, primarily follows chimpanzees. In any case, this dolphin-crewed ship, the Streaker, found something of great interest to the entire universe, or basically to the entire galaxy, and is trying to get back to Earth safely with that information. But along the way, they get ambushed by the entirety of the rest of the universe. And in the rest of the universe, the rules are much grimmer. They are, all the other sort of sentient species in the galaxy are trying to find potential client races that they could uplift, because then after uplifting them, they make them be indentured servants / slaves for 100,000 generations. So it's a real bummer if somebody else finds you who's not humanity. And they all kind of don't like humanity for not being down with their uplift slavery system. So anyway, the dolphins are trying to escape. They crash land on this water planet, which is convenient since they're dolphins, and have to figure out how to get out of there as the entire galaxy is basically converging on them to try to stop them escaping. And it's told in like space opera style, with each chapter following each of many, many different characters. We get a bunch of perspectives of aliens as well. It's super fun, super propulsive. You really want to find out what happens next. Just an all-around great read. So we're going to talk about David Brin, about that book, about a bunch of his other writing, and should be a really fun episode.
Yeah, very excited about it. Let's hear from the man himself, David Brin.
thank you so much for joining us, David Brin.
Well, it's nice of you guys to be curious about the world, the universe. That's where I spend most of my time, so I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and we, as we were, obviously we've read your books, but also looking through a lot of, things you've spoken about and the ideas you think about over the years. It's a lot of the things that we end up seeing in lots of the sci-fi sort of books that we end up talking about and themes that we dig into. So really excited to talk with you about them today. To kick us off, would love to sort of start with how you came to this, because you wrote and published Sundiver before you finished your PhD in physics, right? So did you always know you wanted to be a writer, or how did that end up happening sort of at the same time?
Yes, well, I came from a family of writers going back quite a ways. My father was a journalist of some note and a poet with some international following. His father was a writer with the local Chicago press. My father actually covered Tommy Gunnings as a reporter for the City News Bureau in Chicago in the 1930s. He was old style gangland. There's some characters in movies that are modeled after him. So I always knew ever since fifth grade that I had a teacher who encouraged the bug. So I always knew I'd write eventually, and took a very long-term approach to it. But I was taken out to Griffith Park in LA when I was 7 to watch Sputnik go by. And it had a profound influence on me. And I saw that amazing things were happening that had never been done before. I'm going to take a little side riff here and say that only about 10% of science fiction authors are scientifically trained, as I am. Almost all science fiction authors are deeply imbued in a different topic, and that's history. The long, slow slog of humanity out of mud and grime and disease and idiocy without any help. And all these whole ancient aliens things just make me furious. This was a long, hard. I mean, if they were asking us to drag sticks through the ground to make alien landing fields and pile stones for beacons for them, all I can say is I wish my ancestors had said, "Up yours, you space SOBs. How about a nice community college? How about the germ theory of disease so our children don't die in our arms quite as much?" But in any event, I think the thing I'm more imbued in than astrophysics, although I serve on NASA's Innovative and Advanced Concepts program as an advisor, way fun, tremendous stuff. The thing that impressed me most about human history is that we have been standing on each other's shoulders for a long time, taking grudging, gradual steps. And what science fiction actually does is sometimes it involves science, or what if this change happened, but it's mostly about taking this long, horrible litany of gradual clawing progress called history and extending it a little bit forward in Gedanken experiments, as Einstein put them, or thought experiments, using these lamps on the brow, the prefrontal lobes, which are the only organs we have that animals don't have, no animals have. And science fiction should have been called speculative history, because you're speculating about where history might go next, or alternate histories that might have happened. If you remove the science from science fiction, there's still an awful lot of literature there. But if you remove the speculative history from it, there's not an awful lot left. And now I'm encompassing even some fantasy. So to get around to finally answering your question, even when I was in junior high school and all that, I was imbued in history. And one thing struck me above all else. For the first time in the entire long litany of horrors that was our ancestry, we were assigning a task to millions of people to not to persuade the masses to believe that something's true, but to find out what's true. To actually find out what's true, instead of pushing the state religion, pushing the state justifications for authority. And it struck me how incredible that is, especially in light of all of the damn empires and theocracies and feudal lordships and kingdoms and all of that, where the smartest were assigned the job of persuading all of those at the bottom of the pyramid that this incantation that they used as their justification for power was the truth. Instead, creating a system that tried hard to educate even those whose children are on the bottom of the pyramid, and to tell them, okay, let's start a competition. Those of you who find out what's true or demolish someone else's model of what's true, because that's even more important, you get the gold star. You get the gold star. And that's why scientists today are by far the most competitive humans that our species ever produced. And this is a refutation to one of the big political cults that's demolishing this civilization as we speak, that deride scientists as these paradigm model hugging lemmings who are all utterly terrified of anything that violates the conformity. No, the fact that you would deride them that way is a sign that our value systems dislike preachers of conformity. Who taught you that? It was the freaking scientists. Okay, so in any event, all of that goes a long way around to answer your question that I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be part of the community of millions and millions of people, men and women, who are at the edge, competing with each other, criticizing each other, and finding out what's true. Along the way, I started writing as I knew I would, and I took a very cold-blooded attitude towards it, and that was refine the craft, refine the craft, refine the craft. None of my books gets published without at least 40 names at the back, who I thank for pre-criticizing my work for quality control. And if they just say, oh, I loved it, I say, thank you very much, that feels good. Now you're off the list, because that's not useful. Criticism is the only known antidote to error. Cito Kate.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, so I think that's a really interesting and so true, such a good positive way to look at the world. I'm curious to hear so sort of as your career went on, of course, you started to have quite a bit of success and a lot of acclaim. And I'm curious sort of how you feel the power dynamics shifted between you and like your publisher and editors and those sorts of things over time. Do you think there is any change? It's just something I've always sort of wondered about with sort of over the course of a writing career.
Well, my career has a little bit of a different arc. Because I concentrated on quality control at the front end, of my career. My first manuscript was submitted against my will. Somebody submitted it for me. One of my readers, who I didn't know, but incidentally was a stringer for one of the publishing houses.
Point of order, real quick. You're talking about Sundiver, correct?
Sundiver, yes.
That was submitted? Okay, great.
Yeah,
Cool.
And so I was going to hire a typist after my next round of quality control. And then I got a phone call from Bantam Books offering me 3 times the usual starting rate to just go ahead and publish it. And so before I ever had any kind of rejection slip, I had already sold my first novel. After that, I submitted some stories and got some rejection slips and that sort of thing. But, as Jiminy Cricket sings, fairy tales can come true. It can happen to you if you're young at heart. Jeez, my voice is gone. But I try to pay back. I am running 2 series of young adult novels right now. In one of them, I put forward the advance, and I spend a lot of time mentoring young authors to help them get novels that are up to snuff for a series of time travel interstellar adventures for teenagers, and we can talk about that later. But to show you how different my experience was, my second novel won the Hugo, the Nebula, all those things. That was Startide Rising.
Right.
It had that wonderful.
Right. What was that?
I was guest of honor at the Yokohama Worldcon in 2007, but my Worldcon, the one I owned, was the biggest of all. Perhaps in September, the ChiCon will finally match it. And that was Anaheim in 1984, LA Con. And I call it mine because I went there and had an experience that I hope you 2 guys and large numbers of the members of your audience get at least once in their lives. May you go to a major public event, and when you go from room to room or hallway to, panel or whatever, may you be followed by a hush, and occasional you pick up the words, "It's him." What can I say? It did not last. I became an established old fart in the field within 6 months after that. But for a little while, just a little while, I was the hot young shit. And may you have that. I cast this blessing onto you.
Well, it sounds like it was fun. That's great.
Speaking of Startide Rising, which is how, which was the book that got you that feeling, at least that year, we're interested in Uplift, and they weren't necessarily, the Uplift series wasn't necessarily like the literal first series about that idea, but certainly popularized it far more than anything had, and kind of brought it up. How did you think of the idea? Why did that interest you? Why does Uplift fascinate you?
Well, as you say, it is not the first time that the notion of humans meddling in the intelligence of other animals was done. H.G. Wells did The Island of Dr. Moreau. You have Pierre Boulle in Planet of the Apes. You have Cordwainer Smith's Under People, which is, I think, a fantastic approach and a great author, who I just found out was godson of Sun Yat-sen, the revolutionary who established modern China. That's interesting. I'm not anybody, godson of any but revolutionaries. So if you take a look at all of those stories, like Frankenstein, they had one thing in common. well, two things. One, they were beautiful and fantastic, interesting stories. But the other is that they were morality tales chiding, don't do this, because if you do, you'll do a bad job. So in Island of Dr. Moreau, they are mistreated and they eventually rebel. The same roughly happens in the Planet of the Apes epic. In Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the monster is born good. He is not a warped or vicious creature or even ugly. And the fundamental lesson that most people don't get is that Mary Shelley wasn't saying don't dare into these realms with science. She was saying don't be a bad dad, because Victor Frankenstein behaves extremely badly. He's cruel to the monster, and that's how the monster learns to behave. So I decided that it seemed very likely to me that this is one of the 4 or 5 most plausible ways that we will meet the alien. And I was always fascinated by the alien. You'll not find another human on this planet who has studied that general concept more extensively than I have. And whether we meet aliens from other star systems, and my novel Existence is about whether or not they might already exist in our solar system as long, lingering lurker probes, and we could talk about that, or whether or not we make artificial intelligences. And of course, every generation makes new aliens in the form of their children, who inevitably start shambling around saying, destroy all humans. And 99.99% of the time do not wind up actually doing it. It occurred to me that a way in which we might get other minds, interesting minds to talk to, is by taking the ones around us that are close to that level and giving them a hand, helping them get past what now appears to be a rather firm glass ceiling put above creatures like dolphins and chimps and gorillas, sea lions, elephants, corvids, crows, ravens, parrots. We now know many species that appear to be crowded along a glass ceiling that we somehow crashed through. So I was fascinated by the concept. And then of course, I realized that there had been previous people who had explored the notion. And I realized something, that I was tired of simplistic chiding, finger wagging trips. If you do this, you will automatically be cruel to these creatures and make them hate you. And I grew up in California. You know, if we met, if an alien spaceship, without going zap zap, lands in a parking lot in LA, the National Guard will have to surround it to defend it from people rushing toward it, saying, you know, take me for a ride, expand my consciousness. Have you got any new cuisine? And so if California type civilization were to do it, they would bend over backwards not to have the island of Dr. Moreau. It would make new mistakes. It would make other mistakes. And that's what I find interesting. What if we pay attention to the previous morality tales and don't make those mistakes, the things we were warned about? Won't we invent new mistakes?
What about the Uplift books that sort of came after you? I'm curious how you think of the treatments of the idea afterward. And I think most famously, Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time, which has become sort of mega popular here in the last 5 years.
I think that's lovely. Most of them have been kind and respectful enough to use the word uplift. In Adrian's case, he names a space station?
The Brin Project.
Yes.
The Brin Project is the entire Uplift project.
Right. But I think that he was on the cover of Locus recently. He was interviewed, getting international interview attention. I am so pleased when they choose really smart folks to do that too. Kim Stanley Robinson, my bro, we studied science fiction authorship together. Under Ursula Guin when I was in grad school. He was flown out to Glasgow for the big climate conference and served on 4 panels. So science fiction is in better odor today than it's ever been, even if I'm not. And among the reasons is that people are waking up to the usefulness of future Gedanken experiments. People are waking up to some authors' skill at prediction.
We wanted to ask you about one other book that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet, which is The Postman. And the question we'd like to ask about there is, what was it like, selling the rights and then seeing, your idea sort of get developed into this other kind of art over which, of course, you don't get to have the same kind of control that you do.
Yeah, let me presage that by saying that the greatest storyteller I ever knew was Poul Anderson. Wrote wonderful science fiction, a true tribal storyteller. Why do I point him out? Because he wasn't the best writer. Aldous Huxley and so many others could spin. Kurt Vonnegut could spin authorship better, and he wasn't didn't have the widest range of ideas. That would be Frederick Pohl. But what he did was he cared about story. And I think that I have inherited that. The thing is, you see, obviously, if I care about story, I can't do what Hemingway said when you sell your movie to Hollywood. And that's toss it over the border into California and run away as fast as you can with an armful of money. For one thing, I no longer have that agent because I didn't get an armful of money. And secondly, for 10 years, I had to watch as Warner Brothers hired horrible, evil people to do screenplays that betrayed every single aspect of my heartfelt love ode to the civilization that had been so good to me. Here comes Kevin Costner, and he with his writing partner Brian Helgeland, who says, "Hey, this is a good story, and yeah, I just bought it, and the novel actually has some things in it. Maybe we can use a couple." He was utterly faithful to the heart message of what my book was about, that the hero is not going to restore civilization. This is what I hated about the new Mad Max movie, Fury Road. Everybody likes, and I despise it, because the earlier Mad Max movies weren't as imbued with that stupid solipsistic message. The hero is not going to save civilization. People will if they are reminded that they were once mighty beings called citizens. And that's what both the book and the movie are about. Yeah. Now, did he scoop out and throw away all the brains from my book? Yeah.
and Brent, you to come out of that, to be there, Brent, you had a question that you wanted to ask about, like the pessimism versus optimism feeling in science fiction.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is a lot of what you're saying about the Postman, Dr. Brin.
Yeah, it feels like sci-fi used to be, in general, fairly optimistic about the future. And these days, it is, in general, fairly pessimistic. And I'm curious if you have a take on why you think that might be.
Well, there are a number of reasons, and always was a dyspeptic tone to a lot of science fiction. I mean, I think we're looking back on it with some kind of a rosy glasses when we say it was always optimistic. I actually explore this in another book that I came out with in the last year called Vivid Tomorrows, Science Fiction in Hollywood. And I will provide the link for that in the chat for you guys to put in the description box. Came out from McFarland, the number 3 nonfiction publisher in the world, and it makes the point that we probably exist and are alive today because of the warnings that were in science fiction across the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Accidental nuclear war, there were so many ways in which it could happen, and almost every one of them were targeted by Failsafe, On the Beach, Dr. Strangelove, War Games, Testament, all sorts of ways in which nuclear war could happen. And officers at the time said, oh, this is ridiculous. And then later when they retired, they said those science fiction guys made us change our procedures. The China Syndrome, all these virus movies, Andromeda Strain and all of that. Are you saying you don't think we were affected and better prepared when it happened? 1984 recruited millions of people to worry about encroaching Big Brother, and Soylent Green recruited millions of environmentalists. So there were a lot of dire warnings in the past. The thing that gets me, and I talk about it in Vivid Tomorrows, is how lazy so many of today's dystopias are. They are driven primarily by laziness. If you want to do a story that has compelling characters that are doing interesting things and the reader is turning the pages or glued to their seat, the best way to do it is by putting your heroes in peril. And it's easier to throw them into peril if you start out with the assumption of this horrible, slathering, venom-dripping society.
Yeah.
Look, Hollywood conveys 4 basically positive messages, though they are being abused today, and 2 really dumb ones. Suspicion of authority. You can't name a movie you've enjoyed or novel you've enjoyed that didn't have some kind of authority figure to be resisted. It could be invading Independence Day, death to all humans, aliens, or it could be a nosy mother-in-law. But there's some authority figure that has to be resisted. Diversity, tolerance, and eccentricity. The character usually bonds with the audience by exhibiting some eccentric trait very early. And it doesn't have to be the same eccentric trait as the audience member. Here's an eccentric person, that makes that person more interesting. You can see why the Hollywood zeitgeist makes our films dismissed by some of the despotisms in the world as propaganda, because it conveys messages like this to people, to rulers who want their people to follow the standard systems of respect for authority. The 2 always unsalubrious messages put out by Hollywood, but they are because of laziness, are 1, no institution can ever be trusted. Don't even bother. And 2, your neighbors are all sheep. And these are for that same reason, and that is, if you can dial 911 and get immediate help, then where's your drama? So you have to separate your heroine or hero from meaningful help. The question is not whether you need to do that, but how do you do it? if you do it in an imaginative and interesting way that doesn't push the lesson that civilization is useless. But instead, in this case, the heroine or the hero is separated from meaningful help. And if you guys were in serious trouble, zombies and all of that, I'm sure you know a neighbor whose door you would knock on before you'd even call the cops. And that doesn't exist in most of these stories. The neighbors are all useless sheep. I didn't mean to get off on a tangent there, but
I mean, basically, it sounds like what you're saying, to distill it, is that it comes down to authorial laziness, like laziness on the part of the writer, the creator, instead of trying to make something interesting and realistic and valuable commentary-wise. It's just go for the easy action.
yeah, as I said, I'm a big fan of dire warnings. Kim Stanley Robinson is issuing warnings about climate change and all of that. I think we're around today because of them. Many of the authors of boring, lazy dystopias undoubtedly think that they are telling important dire warnings. These things overlap with each other. I mean, one of the things that feminists said about The Handmaid's Tale was, unlike the febrile fantasies of science fiction, this could actually come true. No, that is not the thing about Handmaid's Tale. It is a polemical exaggeration. 98% of American women and 90% of American men would die fighting to prevent that situation from happening. I may get the figures wrong, but it's not that much of an exaggeration. No, realism is not the definition of The Handmaid's Tale. It's the polemical power of this nightmare that makes it a very, very interesting and well done piece of science fiction. And science fiction it is.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that dire warnings and effective warnings and lazy dystopias are completely separate categories. But we ought to be a people who can recognize when we're seeing one or the other. And then when we're seeing stuff that is just ingrate betrayal. And unfortunately, half the junior high school students in America read a book that the reviewers and the teachers all think is moving and moral and decent with good lessons, and it teaches an absolutely horrible treasonous lesson, and that is Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game, which he's a genius. He's absolutely brilliant, a fantastic stylist, and his character is one of the most endearing, soulful characters in literature since Mark Twain did Huckleberry Finn. He's Christ-like, and he takes the burdens of civilization's horrible mistakes on his shoulders. And we weep for poor Ender and say, "Oh, don't blame yourself. It's all those stupid bureaucrats and warriors and politicians and citizens and everything about Enlightenment civilization that committed those crimes. Here, O demigod, here's all power. The only beings in any Orson Scott Card story who have any merit whatsoever are demigods. In other words, we must go back. We must give up on ruling ourselves." And he makes it very explicit in a couple of his novels.
Yeah, Peter.
Take a look at his novel Empire. I expect that riff to be cut from the. But I wanted you guys to get it.
Well, I
You
do.
never know.
I also, if you want to, there's something we're really interested to hear a riff on, particularly myself, which is I've often said that Star Wars is fantasy in our episodes, and you wrote a whole book about that, it turns out, in 2006.
Star Wars on Trial is the name of a book that I co-edited with one of George Lucas's novelizers. I was the prosecuting attorney, raising 7 charges against Star Wars, based upon my second most infamous and second most hated article in Salon magazine, and his novelizer was the defense attorney, and we called witnesses for various sides of the issues of, whether Star Wars is ungrateful, whether it's fantasy, not science fiction, whether it pushes notions that undermine democracy. And it was huge fun. I mean, we wrote in these sections in between the essays where we're snapping our suspenders and saying I object, and the droid judges fining me for being out of order, and it's a hugely fun book, but it gets down to the comparisons between Star Wars and Star Trek. And a lot of them get more complicated than we have time for, but one really stands out in my mind, and that's the metaphor of the ship. In Star Wars, the important spaceship is a little snub fighter, banking against invisible, non-existent air. The World War I fighter pilot with his silk scarf and his gunner behind him, the Sancho Panza accompanying Don Quixote, Achilles and Patroclus, the knight and his squire, Luke and his droid. It's a mythology that goes all the way back through the mother genre of fantasy, which has always had fantastic elements. I mean, the Iliad, the Odyssey, Hesiod, but the Vedas and the Journey to the West in China. But the mother genre was always oriented toward the notion of demigods, inherently superior beings. And on this ship, there is only room for the superior being and his squire. There's no room for the Republic. The Republic doesn't go on the adventures with him. It's never a topic. And across the entire Star Wars saga, the Republic doesn't do anything. I mean, I don't say it doesn't do anything right. It doesn't do anything. No, in Star Trek, the ship is a naval vessel. It's like the HMS Beagle. Its job is to do science here, diplomacy there, fight over here, do some colonizing, make good relations there, find strange new life. The captain is not a demigod. The captain is merely way above average. And she always needs help from crewmates who are merely way above average. And as a team, they get things done. And the Federation is there, aboard with them. It's mistakes, it's caution, it's excuses for cautionary tales, it's glorious hope that our descendants might be marginally wiser than us. It's a topic in at least half of the episodes of this series. And so, irrespective of the fact that most Star Trek is vastly better written and more interesting than most of Star Wars, it's the fact that it's about stuff It's about us. It's about, more important than us, about our descendants, how they might be better than us. I mean, I spoke of Avatar. The one bad thing about Avatar is that, it's dances with very, 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 very tall Smurfs. It's been said. Did I do 5 or 6 varies?
It was enough.
I don't mind that. I don't mind morality tales shaking their finger at us, saying that we should be better to others and try not to repeat colonialism and to be better at protecting the environment. Fine. But that's not the lesson we come away with. The lesson we come away with is humans are inherently incapable of learning. And in the future, they will be just as rotten and should all die. Because clearly nobody in the Avatar movie had ever watched Avatar. I mean, excuse me? What kind of people are our descendants? And if there had been 5 minutes extra introductory material at the beginning of Avatar, where good humans were negotiating with the not obnoxiously obstinate Na'vi on one of those floating islands, and they were actually figuring things out and signing a treaty, and somebody sabotages and blows up the floating island so that the good humans are gone and the Na'vi who are interested in these things called starships get blown up too. And now it's a battle between the obstinately greedy corporation and the obstinately defend our homeland with arrows types. Well, now we can side with the people who are defending their homeland. But the lesson is not we are doomed to be evil, but a mistake was made. We didn't try hard enough to bring our good side, the side that has grew up watching Avatar. We didn't work hard enough to bring that forward. We didn't work hard enough to put that in charge. Now, is that a quibble? That's a good question. I told you I'm a fanatic about story and its implication. And it could be that the proper response to that is, go away, Brin. You're spoiling all the fun. All I can say is, I think I provide fun.
Well, and I
thought I was the guy who provided fun.
And I think you make an interesting point about how Hollywood novels, the stories we tell, the stories that we give the most audience in our society, become a propaganda of sorts to push society and tell us what to think. And if all the tales are there must be demigod-like beings who are the only ones who are capable of saving us, and and that we're evil, humans are evil, then instead of getting dire warnings from science fiction, instead of getting useful information we could take forward and learn and build from, we're getting just the knowledge that we're bad and we should hate ourselves and wait for someone to come save us.
Right. So, all right, one last question, guys.
Yeah, well, we gotta hit our famous closer then, which is we always try to recommend a few related books at the end of every episode, usually when we're talking about some book. But we've got you here. We would love to hear, sort of what are some of your favorite sci-fi books of all time that you would recommend to people, and then also, if there's something you're reading right now that you really like.
Well, I sort of semi grew up with Kurt Vonnegut. And earlier than that, Bach, the Bradbury, Asimov, Clark, Heinlein. But later on, I very much enjoyed the works, of Samuel Delany and Ursula Le Guin. and those who were expanding the envelope. I think the scariest, as a male who wants to be a decent person, the scariest writer was James Tiptree Jr., the pseudonym of Alice Sheldon, who wrote with scary accuracy and some compassion about how nature made males inherently dangerous. And of course, she wrote fantastic stuff. Aldous Huxley, for a while, I was in that phase, and after many a summer dies the swan, you find out that it was a sci-fi novel all along on the last 2 pages. In the late 60s, a fellow by the name of John Brunner terrified everyone with his incredible visions of possible futures with computers and computer worms and viruses, and his Hugo-winning novel Stand on Zanzibar was the model that I based 2 of my novels on. My novel Earth and Existence. These were both near future explorations that have multiple character threads and samples of your society going on at the same time, and things going on in the world, glimpses here and there. John Brunner based it upon John Dos Passos's epic trilogy, USA trilogy. And Brunner was fantastic and very formative. I mentioned Poul Anderson, the greatest storyteller I ever knew. You pick up anything by him, and you will be immersed in a story. More recently, Nancy Kress is one of the dozen or so non-scientist science fiction authors I know of who write really good scientific science fiction. What she and Greg Bear and Kim Stanley Robinson proved is you can be an English major who could not parse a differential equation if you studied it for 50 years. Their brains don't work that way, but they do know how to buy pizza and beer for scientists and grill them until they figure out what is a presentable, plausible scenario for their characters, their wonderful characters, to pursue. So I highly recommend almost anything by Nancy Kress, Kim Stanley Robinson, my brother Greg Bear, an author who I very much admire. In fact, I love, and actually quite literally is, she writes under the name Cheryl Brin, Brin, and she just got a small award for her first novel, The Melody of Memory, which is such a lovely, nobody's going to think I ghost wrote it. It's very feminine, very lovely piece of science fiction that's just tear-jerking and heart-rending until the character who you've been rooting for several hundred pages susses things out and saves the day. But it has one of the best opening lines I have ever seen. I'm going to recite it for you now. I was 9 years old when my words saved a man's life. It wasn't until later that my words killed him.
Ooh, that's good.
That's a hell of a novel.
Yeah, I want to read that.
I've got one for a story that I started, but I've not been able to finish most of my time travel stories because the physicist in me won't let me. But I've been able to start a bunch of time travel stories, and one of them began, when I was a kid, I thought all families were bothered by time travelers. It wasn't till later that I figured out they were coming back to look at me.
That's good too.
I ought to finish that story sometime.
Yeah.
I like a young woman named Sue Burke, whose recent novel Semiosis is about a human colony on a world where the humans are trying to fit into the ecosystem and not, be rapaciously, behave rapaciously like our ancestors did. But they run into an intelligent plant and things swiftly go awry. I'll provide some. You mentioned Adrian Tchaikovsky. There are a number of Emily Davenport. She's a fine author in the more recent wave. I just had behind me Stanley Chen, Qifang Chen, stand behind me in front of that cover of Sundiver, that Jim Burns cover of Sundiver that's above my head, in the same place where the great Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin stood 3 years earlier. He's the author of the epically admired trilogy, The Three Body Problem. So I guess I was a bit wordy there in answer to your question, but it's an exciting field. There's always some new things happening, and I'm trying to here in the early, I hope, twilight of my career. I'm trying to pay it forward with my YA series, helping to engender and mentor new talents with science fiction that's optimistic for teens.
That's wonderful.
And that Out of Time, the Out of Time, the Yank series is a series by you, but each book is by a different author, right?
Yes. My two YA series are different. The Colony High series about aliens kidnapping a high school, California high school. I'm primarily responsible for those. I have co-authors, but I'm the one who's doing the most intense writing. Whereas the writing that I do for the other authors in the Out of Time series is suggestions. Sometimes they accept them, sometimes they refuse. They have that authority. It's their book. And some of them are really good. The first three actually were written by Nebula winners back in the 90s. Nancy Kress wrote one, Sheila Finch, Roger McBride Allen. They were caught up in the what often happens in both publishing and movies is a change of the guard. The new publisher or the new head of the studio flushes everything that the previous person. So this series died, and then Rosetta approached me and said, well, have you got anything for us? And I said, well, take a look at these three from the 90s. And they said, wow. So we've done three more. And the policy is I'm not going for Nebula winners. I'm going for bright, young, up-and-coming writers or teams of them, and doing some pay-it-forward mentoring. And the results have been, I think, great.
That's great. That sounds really fun. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It's been so wonderful.
Well, you guys are great, and I predict that at least one of you will see the 22nd century. When that happens, you are to gather a party and lift glasses to the other guy. And if both of you are around, lift them to me.
Deal.
I don't think I'll be anywhere, and if I am, I won't be smelling very good. But I might. See you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brin.